What I'm really seeing is that people need to standardize and get their systems and technology in place so that they can scale and that it is scalable.
Welcome to the Vacation Rental Show. This is your essential playbook to grow and scale your vacation rental business with advice and insights from the best in the biz. I'm your host, Lynell Gordon. Welcome to the Vacation Rental Show. I'm Lynell Gordon, your host. And today, on our episode of the Vacation Rental Show, we are excited to welcome Sue Jones. She is the founder and the owner of HR for VR. Imagine that. She is the premier human resources support provider in the vacation rental industry. She has over 30 years of experience in HR, and she is passionate about helping property managers to navigate the challenges of human resources with confidence. And she's really amazing at reducing risk and offering expert advice during your HR crises. So she's dedicated to making HR more accessible and effective for property managers. And in this episode, we're going to explore Sue's best advice to property managers, as well as discuss the biggest mistakes that property managers make. Welcome to the show, Sue. I'm so excited to have you.
Well, Linnell, thank you. It's really great to be here. And, we're talking about all the things I love: property management, HR, people, good times, fun.
It's so true. So it really is. There are a lot of, it's fun, and we work with the nicest people in the industry. So, I mean, what's not to love about our job? Tell me that. Oh, and I just want to say this before we start, because I always found this really interesting. Sue joined the Navy. How old were you, Sue?
I was 17.
17 years old as an electronic technician. She was like one of only 4% of women members at that time. And you said something once that really stuck in my head. You said that you credit your ability to make decisions quickly, which is so important, guys, as entrepreneurs, period. You have to make quick decisions. You said that you learned that in your time in the Navy. And so I just love that. It's like one of my favorite little fun things about our industry. Tell me this. So what advice would you give to property managers who are looking to grow their business?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, as you well know, the industry's really shifted over time. And, where I maybe had been working with property managers with large portfolios and that, since COVID, there's been a lot more working with individuals who are getting ready to scale, who want to put their systems in place. What I'm really seeing is that people need to standardize and get their systems and technology in place so that they can scale and that it is scalable. And when I think about that and I think about these systems, it's really around your processes, your operational systems, how you're going to move from one thing to the next. And it is kind of interesting because when you think about entrepreneurs and we start these businesses and we're all very creative and we bring in all of our friends and family and anybody we know to get the job done, and we get to a certain point and then we realize in order to scale, we have to go back and create the structure and put the infrastructure back in place to support that growth. And a lot of times I do find, people will scale too quickly without that. But the more important piece I think about is really the workforce planning. And today, this is more critical than ever because as you look at your business today, you really need to be thinking about what's it going to look like in 3 years from now. And does the team I have in place today have the capabilities to get me there? Also, if the team you have in place today, do they have the capabilities to really grow and to evolve over the next 3 years? And truly what I mean by that is that there are some people in business today, and I'll consider myself one, a baby boomer who loves technology, but my attempts and my approaches with technology are a lot slower than others. And so when you think about AI and how we're utilizing AI in the workforce today, how does that transcend to these different generations and to people's competencies? And so I really think that as we look at this workforce, you've got to really think about, am I hiring people with the capability to do the job today? Or am I hiring people with the capability to do the job 3 years from now? And I think that's a key differentiator as you're looking to scale.
How do you think about what that's going to look like when you hire someone? When you hire someone, how do you propose that we find out if they have the capacity to really grow with that business?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, one of the more important pieces is making sure that your culture and your values are aligned. And so if we're hiring people who are going to be a good cultural fit, that they actually live the values that we have as an organization, then we can train them and we can skill them. Really looking for individuals who have the knowledge to continuously learn, individuals that are more proactive, really looking at people who want to seek things out, who want to try new approaches. One of the things I've noticed within property management is while everybody does the same thing, everybody does it differently.
That's
And,
true.
we can't continue to grow based on the way we've been doing things. We have to look at it very differently. And I actually love the fact that we've got, the millennials and then younger generations coming in who are really technically savvy. However, they don't have the street smarts, they don't have the business experience that gives them the maturity to maybe make some of these decisions. So it's really interesting as you look at how do we know we're getting the right skill set? I think it's really important to think about, if they're a fit with the values and the culture and they have the ability to learn, then we can grow that skill set.
How do you test someone to know their work ethic, Sue? When you're hiring someone, especially if they're young, we're talking about people that are good with technology. So we want somebody who is, enthusiastic about technology. They don't necessarily have to be young, but how do you know if they have the work ethic? Because if you're going to grow your business, you're going to have someone that has the same work ethic as you do to
That's
be
right.
there for the business.
That's right. So let me ask you this. When we talk about work ethic, what do we really mean by that? I mean, if you think about work ethics, 20 years ago, or for me as a baby boomer, you get in, you're there before the boss, and you leave after the boss leaves,
That
right?
never, no, that never happens. I'm always there before the employees get there, and I'm always there after they leave. It's kind of like the opposite. I never found someone like that, actually.
Well, I would say in this environment, the biggest challenge comes with the remote workforce and the fact that property managers have been used to seeing, seats and butts and seats, right? They're used to seeing people there from 8 until 5 without really truly measuring their productivity or efficiencies. So the big challenge when people started going remote is how do we know, they're working? How do we know they're, not running off and going outside and playing frisbee or whatever, but how do we know they're actually working throughout the day? And this is where I like to think about it's not necessarily the work ethic as much as it's the productivity and the performance. If they're getting their job done, then the amount of time that takes is, up to them. And sometimes you'll have people who will be putting in hours around the clock, and sometimes you'll have people who are going to be putting in hours from 8 until 4. But it really comes down to the performance and making sure that the work is getting done and getting done in a consistent manner that's, bringing the same quality. Work
Let me
ethic is really interesting because, there's a lot around it. And you think about also, the younger generation, the millennials, people who graduated from college during COVID, they don't have business experience. They come to an office and they've never even had work experience. So it's up to us to really start to teach people and to guide them
So I
and
have a question.
process it.
Let me get your guidance on this. Because as we talk about work ethic, I recently was evaluating a remote worker, and I'm also looking to grow, especially in what I'm doing. And I knew because I work a lot. So I'm texting this person all the time on the technology we use. And I would get a text back. But guys, the technology now is so much better. We can tell if they're actually sitting at their desk in front of their computer now. And I knew that the worker was not sitting in front of the computer. And But listen, the work was getting done, but I was wondering, could I get more? Because I felt like there were a lot of things that needed to be done that I didn't have anybody to do. And I was hesitant to reach out to this remote worker. So I noticed that they weren't actually at their desk. And I asked them to keep a note because when they first were hired, I said to them, just as long as you get the job done.
Right.
But then what I did was allow us to get a lot of volunteers. So now the
Sure.
volunteers do a lot of this work. And I was like, okay, I need to know exactly how much I'm paying this person so that if I have to replace them, I'll
Right.
know how much it costs me. And so asking the remote worker to keep up with their hours, I think they were as surprised. They were more, I wasn't surprised. I knew how many hours, but they did not. And so, what is the best way to hold them accountable for that, Sue?
Well, one of the things is finding something that really challenges these individuals so that when they are completing their work ahead of time, they're excited and engaged about working on new things. I mean, that's the biggest thing people are looking for is challenges. There are certain people who like to come in and do their job and just maintain it. I think about accounts receivable, accounts payable, right? You know exactly what your day is, day in, day out, and that's what some people love. Others love to come in and do the job and get it done and move on and do something else, and so always having kind of that carrot hanging out there that will really drive them to even complete their work sooner so they can work on these projects that they're really passionate about. And I found that has really helped because when people are kind of down a little bit, or maybe they, finish something, they're trying to get ready for something else. If they're working or excited about a presentation they're doing, or they're working on a proposal, something that's going to give them some skin in the game, that's going to keep them engaged and continuing to work.
So, should I always have goals that they are trying to meet outside of what they're already doing? Should I, like that carrot, what does that look like exactly, that little dangling carrot that we should keep there?
It's interesting because that carrot looks different for everyone, right? A lot of times we used to talk about work life balance, and, it's really not work life balance. It's more of a work life integration, right? You kind of integrate it along to do the things you like. But for some people, the carrot is, doing something new, working on special projects, taking on a task, being involved in a committee, participating on a board, doing something that's going to give them the ability to get back, or doing something that's going to give them the ability to kind of grow their confidence and to, continually develop. One of the things that's really important is the team you have is really the team you are going to have moving forward, especially in some of these markets where it's so hard to find individuals to work. And so having a plan to really think about succession and growing the talent and developing the talent is really critical today. And a lot of people, when you go to hire people today, they want to know, okay, well, I'm going to come work for you, but what's the next step for me? And they want to move quickly. People aren't satisfied staying in the same job for 2 to 5 years anymore. People want to see progression. And so even having some of a training plan in place when you're going out to recruit and hire for somebody so that you can talk to them and tell them about, here's the opportunity for growth and development within your role, itself. So I think having those goals and then having the individual, I've always found it extremely important when you're talking about training and development goals, or, projects, having that individual involved in setting those, because those are the things that are going to be most important to them. I mean, you probably put a training plan together at times for somebody and they never did it. And you're like, why didn't you do it? Well, didn't motivate me, right? I didn't put it together. You did. So,
I never thought about that. Yeah, I guess
y-
so.
it really is getting the buy-in. There's just a lot that individuals can do. And, when we think about remote, they are more effective. There's been studies talking about that. And I am seeing in the property management world, people are starting to really go back to more of a hybrid model in the events where they can. where they can have somebody work, from home a couple days a week and work in the office if it's not a purely remote position. And that drives the engagement, it drives the community with people. But I always like to have a conversation when my employees start and say, when your day's done and you're through with your work, what are the things you want to focus on? What are things you want to do, the skills you want to develop as you come into this role too? So I think that carrot really depends on the individual. Could be further education, participating on projects, just being involved and I think it's having a broader perspective and understanding the scope outside of your role too.
Let me ask you this. In 2025, in our economy, do you think it's more effective to offer an annual raise or a bonus?
An annual raise, typically people look at that. If somebody's seeing an annual raise on a regular basis, it becomes an expectation.
Does. And that is so annoying, but true.
And if it becomes an expectation, then they start to think about it as a cost of living adjustment.
Yes, they do.
And where we get into the raises, where I like to look at it is the market and what's the role the individual's doing. And let's say you've got a programmer you're working with and you know that you're going to have to fill that position in 2 months. What's the market rate for that role? It may be very different from what you're currently paying if they've been in that role for a long time. So I always like to look at where the individual is, what's the role they're doing, and what is the market rate. And if a adjustment's necessary, make an adjustment based on the market. The bonuses and the incentives are great. I think that if we could find a way to do more quarterly type payouts or triannual payouts, it would make it easier to keep people motivated. When you look at the seasonality of the business and you look at putting annual goals in place, if you're not breaking them down quarterly, sometimes the train goes off on another track and somebody's still working on their bonus that's not aligned with the business strategy anymore. The other piece with bonuses, you have to have goals and you have to be able to, hold people accountable, but be able to, I don't want to say substantiate the bonus, but people are going to be around and say, well, gosh, Sue got a bonus. How come I didn't? So having metrics in place, having measurements. If we're not measuring things, we have no idea what's getting done. And so I would absolutely say incremental bonuses work really well. And especially in 2025, I mean, people are definitely cutting back. There's not a lot of annual increases. We're not seeing a lot of movement on the salaries. So I do think that finding ways where you can recognize and reward your team to keep them engaged and motivated is really important.
This episode of the Vacation Rental Show is sponsored by RevMax, the premier full-service revenue management system built for vacation rental managers who are looking for a market edge. RevMax offers data-driven tools and services that will increase revenue and drive more profit. Connect with their revenue management experts at getrevmax.com and discover their full-service revenue management solution. You'll be glad you did. One of the things that I was really excited about that I think is really interesting this year in 2025, for overtime, 0 taxes taken out. It doesn't cost the employer any more, but the employee gets, 20 something percent more for that same overtime that they've been paying. And I love the fact that, especially my son just started medical work and I'm thinking, they're like, you're going to have overtime. And I'm like, thank God, that's great. This year is perfect for that.
Yeah.
So I think that, does that plan, does that plan into, an HR role that do we think about that with our people? I mean, I don't know how many people pay overtime in the summer.
I think a lot of times people pay overtime just because they need to get the work done. So especially when we're talking about high season in property management, somebody calls off, somebody's off, something happens, and now you've got to pull in other people. And so what I find though in that situation, the overtime, well, it's nice. And this certainly is going to be a big bonus for people. I think it'll be
Yeah.
a huge positive move. But what also happens is a lot of burnout happens.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting as I've seen it shift. When I first started in the industry, I would see people would say, you're salaried, we expect you to work 45, 50 hours a week, or you're hourly, we expect 45 hours. So people would and could plan on overtime. What I'm seeing now is there's more flexibility with the workforce, and people are hiring more part-time workers. They're hiring individuals around 30 hours that can flex up to 40 hours so that you aren't having to incur overtime. But also, I would say there's probably a strong group of people who will be listening to this who will be saying, I can't, people don't want to work more than 40 hours. I hear that all the time. I hear that, oh, people don't want to work anymore. And it's not that people don't want to work. They just, don't want to have to be working
And not
around
get
the
paid
clock
for it,
and
especially if
not
it's
get paid
salary.
for it.
The
Yeah.
the memes out about that, like over TikTok, are hilarious. Like there's just like people have made so much fun of the fact, and it's truth. And I don't know
Yeah.
if that's just we're used to the fact that they expect, the same person to work 45 hours or even fill in for a supervisor and get paid the same. And I think people are just looking at that saying, I don't know that I'm willing to do that. I don't know if it's a particular set of people as far as when you were born, but I know that that is definitely huge. And it's a huge concern for new people that are entering the
Yeah.
workplace.
It is big because you do think differently. And, the generational piece has a huge, huge factor in all of this. And, we've got a lot of generations working together, and you've got the baby boomers who have the knowledge and they may or may not still have the technology skills. We do, but, you've got that knowledge. So you've got a mentor, the millennials and Gen X coming in. And vice versa, they need to really mentor us on utilizing technology more effectively. One of the things, though, I see about overtime, and especially when we're looking at the P&L, and when we look at the wage line, we'll see that the overtime really increases when there's a lot of turnover, when they're not staffed appropriately. And one of the things that I've seen as kind of an unintended consequence is property managers will give people unpaid time off. And so they think, here you've done great, we'll give you some unpaid time off. Well, that unpaid time off creates a liability because the work still has to get done. And so that work is getting done by these other individuals who are still there. And one client I was working with, we did some analysis on that, and it ended up they had given over 6,000 hours of unpaid time off throughout the year to different employees, which equated to 3 full-time equivalents. So you're counting for 3 full-time equivalents in the business that aren't working. So there's
Wow.
a lot of really interesting dynamics and things to look at when we're looking at the workforce and planning for this. And that's where I'm starting to see this 30 hours where people can ramp up. You don't have that overtime when somebody's out. It's not as hard to fill. And then the other piece that's really adding complexity is the fact that there are a lot of long tenure employees in this industry. And when they leave, you're not going to be able to replace them one for one
That's right.
because their
That's so true.
ability and their skills and their knowledge, it's almost, if somebody's been with you for 5 to 10 years, you're looking at 1 to 2 people to replace. I mean, this is like the most complex industry I've ever worked in. And I've worked in 9 industries. So it's like, and that's where I think I love it, is because nothing is the same ever. And we do a lot of planning and we do it. We're not really good at checking and adjusting. When I go back and talk about standardization, I've done a lot of deep dives into businesses over the last few years. And their processes are still the processes from the days when they started when it comes to the HR side. And so it's, there is an opportunity as we look to scale to really build those systems in place now and the infrastructure. And it's so much easier, I think, today than it was 10 years ago because you do have within the workforce, you've got consultants, you've got subcontractors, you've got staffing agencies, you've got, full-time year-round employees, you've got temporary seasonal. So you have a real mix you can draw from. Whereas before, we've kind of said either you're an employee or you're a contractor and never cross those lines, right?
I'm going to change the subject, but it's something I just want to tell people that you are just incredible at. And that is when I first started my business, actually, that's not true, about 10 years into my business. About 10 years in, I realized how important it was to have an notebook for each, for the employees that my attorney was happy with. Let me put it that way. So this is something that you are incredibly good at. I will tell you that I know that you did a workbook a employee handbook for someone, and I happened to see what you'd done, and I looked at it and I said, "That's remarkable. I have never seen a better employee handbook." And my attorney had gone through my employee handbook, and I'd already had her do it for me because that's the thing we worry about in business, at least in mine. You want your employees to be happy,
Right.
but you also want to make sure that you guard against lawsuits. So if you need an employee handbook, reach out. I'm just telling you that Sue is like the top of the line with that. What are the biggest mistakes you see property managers making, Sue?
Well, even if we think about the handbook, right? I do a lot of client training, on-site meeting facilitation, and it always starts with the employee handbook. And the biggest piece is that we have this in the employee handbook, and obviously it provides protection to the company, but it also provides, insurance for supervisors and managers on how to manage situations. And it gives employees information on how to act and what behaviors are acceptable, et cetera. But what happens with the handbook is the supervisors and managers never get trained on how to manage those policies consistently. So when I see companies that have employee handbooks, it's one piece, but the practices and the information that are in the handbook are not what's actually happening in the business. So they're not in alignment. And when I think about that, that's a big concern because today from an HR, well, let's just talk about regulations. All the regulations going on. Well, we have all those in HR as far as compliance as well. And when we're talking about remote employees today, the biggest thing going on is the dual taxation. And is there, reciprocity between the two states, or are these employees having to pay two state taxes and, file
Oh,
for that?
wow.
And so there's a lot going on there. But I do think that the biggest takeaway for me is that making sure you have the operational structure and the infrastructure in place before you grow. Because once you start going after that, that's when, things start dropping through the holes or people go back to old ways. You can have all your SOPs up there in the cloud. They can be on a book on your desk, but reality is people very rarely look at those SOPs because they think they know how to do what's getting done. And so this is where these deep dives have been really helpful, coming in and kind of just doing a deep dive into the processes and making sure that they're staying fluid, that they're adaptable, that you're continually flexing with them. And then the other piece about this is the system and process. And I always look at when you set your business strategy, then you have to set your people strategy. Because when you have your business strategy and you set your goals, now you've got to have the people and the resources and the goals and the HR strategy so that you can achieve, this business time. And a lot of times people don't necessarily go to that step. And what I see is that it's all about heroics and hustle. And it's about putting out the fires, and people are being rewarded for putting out fires and crises instead of taking time and putting the process in place so people can be proactive. Kind of goes back to Stephen Covey and those 4 quadrants, right?
Yeah.
If you're always in that Q1, you're always putting out fires, But when you put out those fires, you're getting recognition. And so we've kind of built this that if you're a firefighter, you're doing a great job. And so we've got to really move away from that. And the way to do that is to free up a lot of the manager's time so that they can actually manage their team. I'm finding that most managers in the industry today, they have a full-time day job. And then it comes to managing their team or coaching their team or developing
Right.
their team.
That's
When
true.
I ask managers what's the thing that falls to the bottom of the priority list, without a doubt, it's developing a team and it's documenting. And so when I look at a job description or I look at a role, I like to think about, managers having 20% of their time to coach and develop and train and to grow their teams.
Oh, I
because
love that.
they're
Would
not
you repeat
growing their
that? I want you
teams.
to repeat that one more time. What
Yeah.
percentage of time?
So really thinking about 20% of their time. So if somebody's working, 40-hour week, that's 8 hours. And that's a day. And how many of your managers actually spend a day on coaching, growing, and developing their teams?
I love that.
Yeah. And that's where it's at today, because when I look at the cultures in these businesses I work with, people have got great cultures. And what happens though within that culture is they don't have the bandwidth to continue to grow and develop. And I think I mentioned it earlier that the team you have in place today is really the team you're going to grow with. We know how hard it is to bring people in, and, finding a way or having an area like one of the clients I used to work with, guest services was the roundabout, right? And the people would come in and people would go out and they'd move into other positions and there was a lot of churn. But it was the best thing ever because while they were in that guest services role, they learned about everything from the business. And so understanding what is that entry role into your business and how do we grow people from that? And
Oh, I love
that can be
that.
very frustrating. The guest services manager in that role was really frustrated because they couldn't retain people. However, they were growing and developing these people to move up into the company into other roles, even lateral roles. And I think it's really important today, property managers start taking a really good look at their teams and doing a skills gap analysis and seeing where their team is at and what's the gap as to where they need to be. Because you're not going to be able to go out and replace somebody's tenure and knowledge and relationship with your homeowners and guests with somebody coming in off the street. So it's a really dynamic time. And I'm actually really glad that HR is kind of at the forefront again, because people are starting to recognize the value of the people that are in there. And, they are your asset.
For sure. When you think about the manager's role, especially a manager that manages managers, think about that, because we have managers that manage managers in our property management. Because you have different areas. Of course, you're going to have somebody that's over that. But when you think about how to develop all those managers, that's a full-time job, especially if you're managing 5 managers,
Right.
or 6. So,
And I would say the other
yeah.
thing is that a lot of the managers, or, again, it comes to training, really providing, a lot of the clients I work with will do offsites once a year and do management training and that. But the other thing is just making sure that they have the managers have the ability to delegate and to lead, instead of directing and controlling.
Oh, I like
So,
that. Manage and lead, don't direct and control.
right. And it is really hard for some managers because they're not sure, what happens if somebody can do my job. Well, that's great because there's a new job for you. There's
That's
more
true.
to be done.
That is so true. I love working when people work themselves out of a job and they can go do
Right.
something else.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I wanted you to tell me your favorite property management story.
I just really, really struggle with that because I have so many. I think one of my favorite property manager stories is that I can never say no because everybody's got such a unique business and it's such a relational piece and it's in such a great area to travel to. So I really love that. But I will say, when you think about it, is I think about the diversity, and I think about every client I work with, we're all doing the same thing. We all want to bring hospitality. We want to have that excellent homeowner experience and guest and employee experience, but everybody's doing it differently. So there really isn't a one size fits all. I mean, truly, it depends. I mean, if you're thinking about huge growth and acquisition, and that certainly, but when you're starting with, 5 properties or 25 and you want to scale, you're growing that. And as we're growing that, there are all these different ways to go about it depending upon the, property manager's goals and where they're at and what they want to do. And the other thing was, for me, it was fun when I came into the industry, learning a lot of the code words. And a couple of my favorite were blueberries and jelly beans for bed bugs. I'm just like, what are we talking about? You know, and I really, being in HR, you really have to understand the business strategy and where it's going, because HR is a non-revenue adding department. And so we've got to be able to quantify all these costs. And for me, a couple of the times that I most enjoyed being on site with property managers is when I actually got to get in and be involved in part of the business. And two of those experiences were dealing with hurricanes coming. And for me to sit there and see what you all go through when a hurricane or a natural disaster or something's coming down the pike is fascinating.
It's crazy.
So
Crazy time.
it is crazy. And I will say, the other thing, when I started my business, well, almost 14 years ago, when I would work with consultants, I'd think, okay, 2 years, we've sucked up all your knowledge, time to move on. This industry, these relationships are for life. I'm still working with clients from day one, or if, as they move around, people are still reaching out. So I really, really love the relationships. And, even when I exit from HR, I'm still going to stay around in the industry because this is where all the relationships are. It's just been fascinating, and it's been really fun.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The one thing that you guys have to know about Sue Jones is that I've been in this a long time, a lot longer than 13 years. I have never heard anyone say a negative word about Sue ever, and ever. And I mean, never. And you're a part of our family. Like my family personally, you're a part of our family. We love you so much. And I just want to tell you how grateful we are. And I'm going to say that for anybody that works with you, how grateful we are for the work that you bring to our companies, the advice and the circumstances that you're able to create for the companies that you work with. I mean, just the ability to bring in strategies for creating, policies that work around what we do. And I mean, maybe, especially since we all do it differently, you're able to come in and craft that individually for us to make it work for our companies. And I love what you do. And no one else I know can do what you do. And I think you're just the best at it. And I just want to say thank you for sticking around and being a part of it. And I hope that you'll come back. We're doing this short little series with you and Rochelle Hobbs, and I think with April, and we're going to talk. And I'm thrilled about that. We're going to have so much fun going through that, because the amount of practical advice that you guys bring is just, it's mind blowing. So I know that that's going to be another amazing time together. So I just want to say thank you for coming and the Vacation Rental Show.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that. And, I think it's been really hard for me as, 2 years ago, I thought, oh, I'm going to step back. And I can't step back because there's always someone who needs something. But I am bringing in a business partner, and so that we can really increase the capacity. And also that when I do step back, I know that there is going to be somebody in the industry providing these services. So
I love that.
About that. Oh yeah. I mean,
Thank you.
It's really hard. So But I thank you. This has been great, and I'm looking forward to sharing more as we go down the road.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to for our next meeting. I know that my sister's very, very excited about that too. So I'm excited to
Yeah.
see where it goes. So we'll see you
Oh,
on our
me
next
too.
episode. And thank you for all the advice. If people want to reach out to you, Sue, and they need your help, how would they reach you?
The best way is just to send me an email. It's pretty simple. It's Sue at HR for VR. I mean, I think you can't get too more
And it's a
simple
number
than that.
4.
It
It's
is the number 4.
HR.
The number
Yeah,
4.
there you are.
VR.
For VR.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sue, for being with me. I appreciate it. I look forward to hearing more from you soon.
Thanks.
This episode of the Vacation Rental Show is brought to you by RevMax. To find out more about how RevMax can help grow your vacation rental business, visit getrevmax.com. Make sure to search for the Vacation Rental Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. On behalf of the team here at Inhabit, thanks for listening.